Good evening. This is DTV, the Democratic voice on community television in East Tennessee. Welcome to Democrats, Independents, and even curious Republicans. All are welcome here. This evening, we're going to take a look at some of the key issues likely to come before the Tennessee legislature when it convenes for its second session next week. My, how time flies. To discuss these key issues, we are fortunate to have two of East Tennessee's most active and effective legislators, Gloria Johnson and Rick Staples. Gloria, Rick, thanks so much for joining our discussion this evening. Now, most of you know Gloria represents the 13th District here in Knoxville, and Rick represents the great 15th District. So let's start things off with an issue that has been a hot topic for years and years, school vouchers. Last session, in a bitterly contested decision, the legislature voted by a single vote to begin a limited school voucher plan this year. But this issue is far from being settled. Some legislators have talked about repealing the current law that just passed. Others talk about expanding school vouchers into additional districts, such as Knox County. Gloria, one thing I know, you have been a consistent opponent of vouchers from the beginning. And finally, you will be on the Education Committee this session. So what's going to happen?
Well, clearly what's going to happen, there's a lot of frustration. The poll was done after the vote was taken, where only 40% of the state support vouchers, and that was questionable, that poll, because the way they asked the question, they didn't really explain for folks who don't have kids in school and don't understand that. So what they did was they, in a very shady fashion that is supposedly under investigation, and I believe that it is, they passed a bill, held the vote open for 45 minutes in order to coerce people to change their vote. And so the reality is, if I was a brand new governor, I wouldn't want my biggest legislation that year to be passed under those kinds of circumstances. If this bill is good, the people want it, and it'll stand the test, let's repeal it. We have a bill to repeal vouchers this year, and I think most of our caucuses signed on to it. But let's do that, and if you want to talk about vouchers, let's spend a little more time doing that, because the reality is it is put forth as school choice, and what people need to understand, parents and students do not have a choice. The choice is with the private schools on who they take. And so what you've got, maybe a whole bunch of people want to go to a private school. I don't think that's the case, because 95% of us go to public schools, and most of us are very happy with it.
And the issue is affordability. Even if you have a voucher, you may not be able to afford the private school anyway.
Right. Well, and the vouchers for $7,300, the private schools that most people want to get into are more expensive than that, certainly in Nashville and Memphis. Where are these kids that they're talking about from these poor and underserved communities? How are they going to get transportation to that school? Those schools don't offer free lunch. Those schools have uniforms. How do you pay the extra few $1,000s and take care of all of those other things? And the reality is, the reason those kids in those communities aren't doing well is because they don't have access to the services they need. So picking up a kid from one side of town and taking him to another side of town doesn't fix everything. He's going to be away from social workers and guidance counselors and those supports.
And all of his or her friends.
And all of his or her. And that is why in the 9 states that have vouchers, 0 of the voucher students are performing better than the public school students. As a matter of fact, in those 9 states, 7 states have the voucher children performing worse, and most of that's in math. So it's not even demonstrated to be effective in a single state that has them. And Arizona has the ESAs, which is a credit card for those parents. And people have made Mercedes payments. They have paid for hair and makeup. They have paid for, a woman paid for an abortion with that credit card. And so it's going to be a huge job to make sure that money is being spent
So
correctly.
you're going to have a voice on the Education Committee, and you're going to do what?
I am going to fight. Well, actually, I've already started organizing teachers and parents across the state and how to fight this. So there's a really good tight-knit group of folks that are going to do phone banks. They're going to talk to their legislators. And of course, I'm going to make those arguments in committee as well as on the House floor. And my hope, and Rep. Staples knows this, we had a speaker last time who believed you should never speak more than 45 minutes about a bill on the floor. That 45 minutes
total.
He told me, and Mike Stewart was in this conversation with me. My members get upset if we have to talk longer than 45 minutes about an issue. And I said, sometimes we might need to talk 4 hours or 4 days about an issue. These are huge changes in our state budget. 45 minutes is not giving it the time that it needs.
Yeah, well, but this will be coming up, right?
It's definitely coming up. Representative Mitchell has already gotten the bill written, to my understanding.
Bo Mitchell.
Yes.
Is there not a bill, while we're on education?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bill coming back for arming teachers. Is that not right?
Arming teachers is definitely there. Okay. Yeah. So
and that'll probably make it to the full committee.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's ridiculous as well, and we all know that that's not good for anybody. But that is one of the things in education we're definitely going to have to be fighting against.
Well, one of the things in the whole voucher world that has been so clear for the last 4 or 5 years is there has been a huge amount of money pushing to pass and accomplish vouchers. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Millions.
Millions of dollars, which in Tennessee makes a difference.
Right. So, and that's true. And so they and all of these organizations putting these money for vouchers, they're not investing in schools and investing in our kids. They're investing in campaigns of people who are against public education. In my race in 2016, those outside voucher groups put in $500,000 against me because I was a public school supporter. Imagine if the money that they'd spent in races over the last 5 years were invested in our schools.
Sure. Well, okay. Well, we'll await further developments, and we'll probably get back to this issue somewhere down the road.
Excellent.
Now, one of the things that has developed over the interim when the legislature adjourned was extraordinary disclosure that funds that Tennessee gets from the federal government for a program called Temporary Assistance to Needy Families, or TANF, which is the acronym which most people know it by. And this is money from the federal government that is made available to all the states, but to the state of Tennessee in particular, in terms of our interests, to assist families that are struggling, and that and it could be opioid addiction, it could be homelessness, it could be job training, it could just be general poverty matters. And rather than invest these funds in the people who need it and who the money was appropriated for, the state of Tennessee, in its wisdom, simply saved it and put it in the bank and sat on it and didn't do anything with it. And it's the most amazing thing is Tennessee has the largest accumulation of unspent TANF funds of any state in the country, close to $1 billion. So this year, this past fall, this sort of, as I say, hit the fan, and there was a subcommittee set up, and there was looking into it, and the governor. It's hard to know what the governor thinks about it, but Rick, this has been an issue that you've been very concerned about, I know. And what do you see happening? Where do things stand now? What's likely to happen over the course of the next few months, and what's the legislature's role in all this?
I think if you, this isn't really complex, just if you look at some things prior to this money being discovered, okay? So look at a lot of institutions, organizations that helped after-school programs or helped families with youth issues. Even the Epilepsy Foundation, they lost funding or couldn't get grants.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one. We said that if you're going to receive any kind of TennCare or medical assistance, you need to be working, but the working class poor are still uncovered. Now, let me walk to what Gloria was saying earlier, Representative Johnson was saying earlier. evidently you have this huge concern for poor kids because you're trying to opt them out. So now let's just bottle, and let me finish with this. Just walk with me for a second. I'm trying to get to a point. Look at how when we talk about the opioid crisis and people who are dealing with addictions, transportation is their number one issue. So wait a minute. Before this was discovered, we had $1 billion that was aimed to fix all those issues, to help with those issues. $1 billion.
With a B.
Yeah, not one. $1 billion. Now, last time I checked, people who are poor are still poor, still have needs. Nobody knew this money was here. It gets discovered. We lose $300 million, but we're still sitting on $700 some odd million. Now it's discovered, so all of a sudden there's a scramble to do something with it. And the legislature did not get an opportunity to say where those dollars should go. Number one. Number two, and this is what's really important, how come it's okay for you to tell us, well, we're going to retain $400 million, okay, but we'll put 300 some odd million into some initiatives. First of all, you wouldn't have done anything if we wouldn't have found that money. You weren't going to do anything. So if that $1 billion prior to you losing 300 million was geared toward to assist these things that are progressively getting worse, how come you're going to tell me that you're going to keep 400 million of taxpayer dollars for what when people are still suffering? And you're just going to give 300 million? Now, one criticism about me is like, Rick, you conservative to be a Democrat when it comes to money. I do believe in a little bit of reserve. I do believe in holding a little bit back. But you're talking about, we've been sitting on $1 billion while issues are still climbing. If anything, I would agree with you holding 100 million, but give people that $600 million to go into something. Who said it was okay for you to decide how to split that money up? I didn't get to say anything about it. I didn't get an email. I didn't get to make a meeting.
I don't think anybody knows who decided.
Exactly. And who decided these initiatives? Who did the administration talk to? And so when I say that, even on the Republican side, the leadership didn't even hear about these initiatives and didn't hear about the division of this money. So I think something that we really need to make sure that we are adamant about is having a complete say-so on what we put in a reserve, because what you have to remember, this money was not in a reserve. It was in a surplus. There's a tremendous difference between a surplus and a reserve. Okay, and you know that, Mr. Stewart, better than I do.
It was only a surplus because we weren't
using it. So you're going to keep some of it? You're going to keep some of it while people are still poor? And I didn't get to dialogue with you at all. I think it is completely irresponsible. It doesn't show that we care about Tennesseans, who we can show the numbers are there. Everything's progressive. To keep $400 million.
So what do you think? Do you think the Democrats are going to make a real issue of this?
I'm going to rely on Representative Johnson to continue to bring it up during meetings. No, but I think that's a real problem, and I've been kind of voicing that. So it's just something I'm gonna constantly harp on.
Yeah, well, good.
And I think our caucus feels the same.
Yeah, it's just not right. So.
And you know, he talked about the opioid issue, and that's a huge deal, and it affects so many of the things that TANF money goes for. And my big example right now, because it's such a thing that's of importance to me, but we've got these rural communities that are just obliterated.
That's right.
By the opioid crisis.
But also by the hospital closings.
And so UT is currently trying to start a community school at Sunbright. At this Sunbright school, it's a K-12 school. There's like only 8 left in Tennessee. 80% of those kids do not live with their parents. 25% of their parents are dead. And they're getting nothing. And we have dropped, our rural schools have dropped more in what they're getting than any other state in the country. And the reality is, there's a line in the budget, and I don't know if you've seen this, but Williamson County got $175,000 for their schools for trap shooting. Now, trap shooting is great, and it's a wonderful thing, but should we be spending $175,000 in Williamson County, the best funded, the best
richest
scorers,
county.
the wealthiest county,
in the state,
$175,000 for trap shooting, when in order to start that community schools program in Sunbright, they've already gotten $150,000. They need another 150,000.
Yeah.
Imagine if that money had gone there, what it would do for
well,
that
by and
community.
large, in these rural areas, they're represented by Republican legislators.
Exactly.
Are they going to speak up?
Well, this one's a Democrat. This person is.
Yeah,
speaking up.
I don't know because a lot of times I think our rural colleagues work against their constituency. But then what you have to think about too, historically, most of your rural counties out of 95 counties, are represented by Democrats for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And so that switch over, that idea of how people function and are able to deal with their daily responsibilities in life is difficult because Gloria and I did a news conference about this TANF money. We were at a daycare, and Gloria, you can speak to this as well. We talked to the owner of that daycare. She has parents that, because they can't get the money and assistance with daycare costs that TANF money is supposed to go to, they quit jobs.
Yeah.
And then you want to criticize them and say they want to take advantage and stay on the system.
And she has such a heart for those kids. You know,
Right,
she was just heartbroken from stories she would hear from parents when they had to end services. And it was just, it's heartbreaking.
Why is $1 billion in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're having
Yeah.
it's
And these are parents trying to, continue to work and do. Americans and Tennesseans are doing all the right things, everything they're supposed to do, but it's blockade after blockade.
Right. Well, that's kind of a good segue to the next question I want to ask, because I know Gloria has been speaking out loudly and for a long, long time. The fact that the nation's economy and Tennessee's economy does not work for everyone. And so talk a little bit about how serious this problem is. I think all of us sort of know it, but many of us don't live it.
Yeah.
And that's important to know. So
Right. So what you're hearing at the national level is, oh, the stock market is high, and in Tennessee, oh, we've got a AAA bond rating. Well, I can tell you that where I live, families don't measure how they're doing by how the stock market is doing. They measure it by how their family's doing. They are not rolling around in stock dividends in their homes. It doesn't affect them. But what we do know is in the Tennessee, 50% of families are afraid they're not going to have enough for retirement, and they're not going to have enough if they have a major emergency like a health problem or even a car problem. And 70% of Tennesseans say that we don't have good wage jobs. And so the reality is the economy's working great for those who have money, but the rest of folks are struggling, and a third of Tennesseans are struggling to meet their monthly bills. We know all of these things. So saying that we've got a great surplus and a AAA bond rating, as he was saying, some money should be spent to lift others up. Things like expanding Medicaid, and there's going to be new life there, and I'm really excited about it. Expanding Medicaid and fully investing in our public schools.
yeah, I read about a report this.
And raising the
Today.
wage. We've got to raise the wage.
So they've done a serious study. I think it was Vanderbilt and Harvard,
Yes.
and that the states that have expanded Medicaid have done demonstrably better than the states that have not.
It's like we've been telling them for several years, huh, John?
That's right.
But then a couple of things on that. I had a town hall the other day about African American poverty in Knox County. Tennessee should not be proud of the fact when we're talking about we have this high rating, this AAA rating, when Knox County leads the state in poverty for blacks. Shelby County second, and they're both nationally ranked in the top 10 and some the top 5. That how can you brag
so
about that?
Brag about that surplus and that bond rating when people are suffering
Still
like they
suffering. And at that level, and I thought it was going to be a slight riot when they showed on the screen that the average income for Knoxville was $52,000, and I heard somebody say, "What the
Where?
hell?" Yeah, right. So it was. I said, "Oh, it's going to get out of hand." But because I didn't know it was $52,000, but you can't tell by some of the lack of, because Gloria and I really represent the city of Knoxville. You just some areas, some neighborhoods we see just that don't have that investment at all.
Yeah.
So you don't think that's a concern, because where are those dollars going?
So we know there's a problem. What are you guys going to do about it?
Well, we're gonna bring legislation to address all of those issues, and that's what we're about, making sure that the economy works for everyone in
You're saying
Tennessee.
you have a plan, right?
So,
Yeah.
we've both got plans,
Plans.
and it's plans for hardworking Tennesseans.
Right.
and making sure that we are bringing people into the middle class instead of having them fall out, because that's what's happening. And you know, we didn't even address the fact that we have had more children uninsured in the last year in Tennessee. And not just children, now we know that more people, because of the lack of time to sign up for the ACA, we've also had more adults and families losing their insurance or not gaining insurance this year. And it's because of all the blockades that the administration has put in front of that. And there are some people out there that don't know the ACA is still going strong.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a remarkable thing.
It will save so many. Yeah. And Medicaid expansion will give insurance to those 300,000 in Tennessee who so desperately need it.
And we can't lose that message. I don't want to interrupt and get it, but what criminal justice has been taken from us, that was our mantra. Gloria has a bill, and the governor just did a thing that Democrats have been talking about, paid family leave. That's something for like near 2 decades Democrats have been trying to do. We've lost that message. And you know, Republicans are pushing medical and recreational marijuana, and that should have a D on it all day, because we're kind of losing the message.
But they're not pushing it. They're talking about it, but they're not working to pass it. So I say we pass it this year.
Right, because you know, Senator Bowling is
that's something across the aisle.
Yeah.
Both parties want, to the tune of between 70 and 80% of Tennesseans want medical marijuana. Why have we not done that? You know, 66% want Medicaid expansion. We are ignoring the majority of Tennesseans on many of these issues.
This is just a personal statement. This is, I don't want to have anybody associate themselves with this necessarily. But it was very hard with the last speaker for Democrats to do anything, because his principal aim in life seemed to me the obliteration of the Democratic Party.
Sure.
And Gloria, he treated you terribly.
Yes, he did.
And I mean, just terribly. And Rick somehow managed to get a couple of bills passed, but I, for the life of me, don't know how you managed to do that.
I got beat up a little bit.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
I gave him a little bit of a fit on the floor on one of them.
Yeah.
I still got to do that again.
One of the most unexpected developments, of course, of last year was when the speaker was kicked out.
Yeah.
And a new speaker, Cameron Sexton, is now there, and he seems to be, just from looking at it from a distance, a guy who's much better, that he's more reasonable. He has a better sense of fairness. Now, time will tell on this.
Right. I'm going to wait and see.
Yeah.
You know, it looks better so far, but I'm kind of wait. I need to see more. What I saw last time was so bad. I'm going to need to see quite a bit before I really. But he does seem to be making some more respectful moves and that sort of thing. So I appreciate that.
East Tennessee's going to
I do appreciate the difference already, but.
Well, what was the committee that Cassida had you on?
Oh, I've already forgotten.
Something about names of
naming and
monuments?
designating. They created that committee for the bad kids, as I say, and that's the bad kids in both parties. That but Cameron Sexton did take me off of that committee and put me on education and on GovOps.
Well, I wonder why, other than the fact that your whole career has been in education.
27 years,
I can't think of a reason why you should be on education.
Yeah, I mean, I really do appreciate that, and because it kind of makes the promise hold true. When I was in orientation, and Leader Lambert says, well, we put you where your experience is. And this was before we were assigned committees. And I was like, okay, I'm counting on that. And, they made a liar out of him. Yeah. They put me on local government, which I like for a lot of reasons. But typically that's your city council people and your county commission people who have had those kinds of experiences. And so it was interesting.
Well, I mean, it's invaluable to have you on education, because your whole life has been education and teaching tough kids, difficult kids.
Yeah.
And so you know what it's like and what is needed, and you have stood up for teachers, and so that's why this whole school voucher business is going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. We're almost we're running out of time, as we always do on this program. Rick, you're interested in opportunity zones, just say a word or two in a couple minutes about what in heaven's name are they? And
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that's an explanation that would be beneficial to a whole lot of folks.
But just it ties into what we talked about. A lot of disinvestment and opportunity zones initially are kind of designed to uplift communities, to revitalize, but can be used as a tool for gentrification. So maybe we have to consider legislation to put some stop gaps in there, because what could easily happen is that if you come in with enough money, you can pay well above, almost triple what something is worth, and it's really designed to do something for our seniors and individuals with low income, and to give them better housing, affordable housing. But you could end up using opportunity zones in order to warehouse people. And you could easily find where cities will design an area that they specifically move the elderly and specifically move low to moderate income folks, and that's not right. So maybe have to be some incentives or stop gaps in there, because it will continue to make poor people poorer.
Well, I'm under the impression that some of the high-end developers have grabbed onto opportunity zones and are using them in terms of their high-end development schemes. So
they can use those as a tax cover. If you purchase that property, you can easily hide tax dollars there, but you will get a windfall from those tax dollars if you sell whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of like the charter school thing, where they made it. If you invested in this charter school in a poor neighborhood, you double your investment in 7 years. So it encourages those folks to take part in that. But you're right. I mean, legislation for that would be great. I hope you can thread that needle, because I think it's really difficult.
So you're going to be working on that, Rick?
I've been trying to work on it for like 3 months, but it's just it's very difficult.
That's got to be involved.
And it's just to encourage looking at the tax code and how we have things set up, and then I'm not getting that much support in trying to put those stop gaps in.
So but I mean, I think just raising the issue and sticking with it is of value, because eventually that can pay off down the line.
Well, that's it. You start that conversation, because last year when I brought that paid family leave bill, it's exactly the plan the governor's using, the one that they laughed at when I brought it last year. And so even if you don't think you can pass that bill, it starts the conversation.
Well, speaking of paid family leave, the governor did sign an executive order making it available, 12 weeks of paid family leave for new parents and for caregivers for sick relatives, and
if your own sickness.
And most Democrats applauded the decision, because they've been working for that for many, many years. Many Republicans opposed it. Some attacked the governor for doing it. And nonetheless, he's hanging in there, and we should applaud that, because it's going to help. It's going to help state workers.
It's a start for sure, no question. But let's open it up to everybody.
I was going to say that's the next step. There are.
Right. Well, because my bill is done the same way, the one that I brought last year. It doesn't cost the state a penny, and it doesn't cost business a penny. It's the cost of a cup of coffee, $3 a week for the employee, and you get 12 weeks.
Okay.
Paid
Well,
leave.
That's another one to keep our eye on. And you will hardly believe it, but we are out of time again. And so thanks to Gloria and Rick for a stimulating half hour. It just sped by. And I suspect we'll want to revisit these and many other issues later in the session. Next week, Bill Owen talks about Iran. Don't miss it. Thank you and good night for Democratic Television.